Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome to a very special episode of The Dreaming Prophet, your favorite lore podcast, and perhaps your favorite friend in exploring the unknown. Tonight, we're deep diving into a special kind of mystery, so pull on your latex gloves, put on that mysterious white apron, and get ready for the second part of our long ago lesson on anatomy. And tonight, my lovely co-host and I are holding a scalpel to slice open the mystery of the instrument. My name is Lavanya.
I'm Astro.
And I'm xaviul.
This is a Blackout Club show for Blackout Club players with minimal speculation, all lore, and a focus on the known facts. Our topic of the day is corrections, and a follow-up on our instrument episode.
To start us off, as always, The Dreaming Prophet is not spoiler-free. We are organic and free-range, though, so feel certain in that. Our content warnings for tonight are after the corrections, we will be discussing human and animal anatomy. So if you're particularly averse to hearing about the squidgy-widgy internal workings of owls and other disgusting mammal-like animals, owls are now mammals, that's a canon fact, then I would tune out now and preserve your sanity. Now, the last time that we had a corrections episode, dear listener, was eons and eons ago, back when Dance for Us was still alive and the world was peppy, zany, and full of them, except for the dead children. But since this is a live game, sometimes information grows. Sometimes the things that we said before, through no fault of our own, are completely wrong in hindsight. Sometimes we just want to give updates. But the long and short of it is, this is the corrections episode where we correct everything that we got wrong in the past.
So, this episode will be a reflection on all our past episodes and all of our past mistakes, 1 through 20, with some corrections and updates that we just didn't know back then. Forgive us.
We'll start with episode 1, Initiation. What a throwback. This was a quick primer to the game, our very first episode, and it was made even before the 1.0 release of the game, so it's got some age on it. We just wanted to let you know that lucky loot does pop on shop items, which is super helpful.
Next up is episode 3, Listen Up. This episode was all about the gods, again, prior to 1.0, the full release of the game. We now have a name for the 8th god. It's Hunt the Strong. He's also known as the Beast or the Hunter, and, well, a whole bunch of other nicknames we won't get into.
Before his name was found, the idea warned us that saying hunt in prayer might invoke him, and many of his sniped prayers talk about strength. He himself also pretty much frequently speaks of his message, hunting the strong. It turns out he's pretty much a narcissist.
Now that we know his name, it seems like saying those words is safe, but we don't have solid confirmation on that.
Episode 11 was the Midnight Report. This was our plot roundup episode where we dove into the nitty-gritty of Unknown Caller and everything that was going on at that point.
And obviously a lot has changed since then. We have a lot of updates and a handful of corrections. However, we plan to cover those in episode 21 when we discuss how those plots ended and what's happened since then.
Also, we've been pronouncing Colum Ryan's name wrong literally the entire time. It's Colum. Irish names don't read properly to native English speakers because it's a different language, but we do our best.
Shout out to Burrick.
Episode 12 was Enhanced Horror and You. The episode covered tips for enhanced horror for those who want to become better engaged with the system and with the community.
The gods tend to spend more time with larger groups. This was originally in the audio and script, but had to be removed because the audio was damaged.
And while most of the gods are pretty friendly to a certain degree, air quotes included, and they will talk to the group as a whole and actively encourage friendship and camaraderie and friendship bracelets, Hunt the Strong specifically will try to pit people against each other. Now, we're just sharing this information. What you do with it, and if it involves ritual murder, is up to you.
On that note, if you're trying to reach a voice, send prayers, many and as often as you can. Null said, quote, "My advice, unless for RP reasons your character would never speak to another voice, is to spread them around. Keep them current too, even asking the same question if you wish. As adolescent characters, a major advantage you have is that you can hold them all in your head. For now. End quote.
Also, personal dreams can now be replayed. They are no longer lost to the ether if you forget to record them. Check that out on the Boxcar laptop. The Responses tab at the top will have all of your old personal dream recordings.
On that topic, we also got some helpful advice for console voice chat with Enhanced Horror. Noel says, quote, on console, a lot of people use party chat, so they cannot be heard by the Enhanced Horror system. Lots of misses for every hit, which is time consuming. Unless you're streaming with friends that you need your stream to hear, use prioritize game audio / in-game chat, end quote.
Speaking of console, we recently found out that Unknown Caller may have visited console players even before they got ganked by Hunt the Strong. If you've been contacted by Unknown Caller, please join the Discord and share what you remember.
Next is episode 16, Freeze Frame. This episode covered some lore facts and stories about the Idare's past hosts. We recently got new information about the nature of fragments.
The Idare said, quote, you see, these echoes of me are a trick. You find them, the image finds you, helps their memories become yours. If you stand where one was made, my presence in your mind helps interpret what was left, end quote.
This seems to explain how the Idare helps players recall these stories, but then he went on saying, quote, spies when caught eat poison, only the most devout. But this, the opposite, a way to burn them in, that their fight may be remembered, end quote.
The Idare also says all his fragments have been found. What that means for his eventual name change, we can't be certain, but it might be good to keep on the radar. You can still collect fragments in-game if you feel like hunting, though, so go wild, especially since some new locations, or at least new to the community, have cropped up recently.
Episode 17 was For Whom the Bell Tolls. Seed the Grudge told players she wasn't born out of nothing. She apparently knows what In Her Teeth knew before she split off and went on her own at least. Does she know everything In Her Teeth knew? That's unclear, but she suggests as much, so further confirmation might be needed. Get those lights out.
So, as we mentioned in the beginning, we're going to talk again about the instrument. We started this discussion in episode 8, The Language of Bodies. Lavanya and Xaviul let me indulge in part of the game that I find incredibly fascinating, and now I'm asking them to indulge me again, briefly.
In the closer, we touched on the idea that the rooms in the maze are based on body parts. Now, finally, we have time to follow up on that. So, as we noted in the content warning, if you don't want to dig into the nitty-gritty of anatomy, this is the point that you tap out.
And of course, before we begin, here's a speculation warning. None of these things have been confirmed. The only thing we've confirmed is what we said in episode 8, the rooms, or at least some of them, are based on body parts. We're mentioning them primarily to give you, the listener, something to consider and research yourself, to either prove or to refute. You're free to disagree. We aren't here to tell you our way is the only way. We're not speak as one or anything. It's just food for thought.
So our next part is birds and humans. When we're talking about anatomy, we need to establish the anatomy of who? Bird pun. Or the anatomy of what? Not a bird pun. The answer is hard to say. The maze presents a unique difficulty in the fact that most of the time we're seeing the organs from the inside, and unfortunately we are not specialized scope, we are only human children. So, suffice to say, that's an uncommon perspective that's a little hard to grok. Some rooms seem to be built after human anatomy, but a good portion of them seem to be built based on bird anatomy instead, specifically owls. So that's pretty exciting.
First, for example, is Cryptogram Library. This entire room is based on eyes. The upper walkways form lenses, and the weird uvula-shaped things form pupils in the negative space. The little theaters on the floor, 2 of them, are the backs of the retinas where images are projected.
The purpose of the cryptogram library is that the room stores and it sorts cryptograms, which are the written records of the dances that comprise Old Tongue. It also projects these images into viewing pods, so everyone can see. Get a little yoga going on. On the other side of the projector is a discard box. Potentially, this could be that they're throwing away cryptograms that don't contain Old Tongue, or else it could just be a kind of rough way of returning the cryptograms for some poor sleeper to have to sort through at night.
This is why you'll never see a dab projection, unfortunately.
We keep adding it and they keep disposing it. It's a vicious cycle.
Next up is string relay. This is based on the syrinx, a special organ only found in birds. The syrinx adjusts airflow and allows birds to sing.
The syrinx is Y-shaped. You can look up pictures. The split in the Y leads to nerve center on one side and the airway on the other. The places where there are moving strings in the maze are where the airflow would be changed by the muscles in the syrinx. Its purpose seems to be perhaps the string section or like an orchestra part to the song, but more specifically, it seems to be some kind of tuning implement. The strings that move back and forth are changing length and tension, which changes their pitch.
The plexus is the next part of our strange bird owl man creature that we are investigating tonight. The plexus can refer to the solar plexus, which is also known as the thoracic cavity, which contains the lungs, and if you're a bird, the air sacs. This one is pretty fucking obvious because those big ass airbags are a little hard to miss. If you have missed them, just stand at the entrance of the plexus, wait, and your eyes will naturally be drawn to the strange organic pulsating.
I hate that phrasing. The purpose of this room seems to be to add to the song. It's an instrument called an organ. If you've never seen an organ before, it's a huge piano with pipes, played usually in vampire movies and churches.
Churches are really just vampire movies waiting to happen, and I guess that's the real reason why we don't have religion in Red Acre. We can't have this game turn into Curse of Strahd. The rating would just go up.
The plexus also pumps and supplies air to other necessary places, like the airway. The pipes in the room, which make up the instrument, the organ, may either be principal, flute, or violet pipes. They are flue pipes specifically, not reed pipes. Essentially, air is being forced through an opening which causes it to vibrate air down the length of the tube. The bigger the tube, the deeper the sound. But there is no reed, therefore there is no wood involved in this. It is all pressurized air and metal.
Signal relay is the next room in our exciting adventure. This one, as far as we can tell, refers to the interclavicular air sac. If you have difficulty pronouncing that or understanding what I just said, don't worry, it's not just you.
The interclavicular air sac is really hard to explain without a visual. If you can, please look up a picture of bird lungs to follow along. In the episode description, we're linking an animated illustration done by a lithographica who makes incredible comprehensive scientific illustrations about animals.
Air that goes into a bird first goes to the posterior air sacs, which are beyond the lung. Then from there it'll filter on into the real lungs and then into the interclavicular air sac.
If you break down that name, interclavicular, it means inside the clavicle, so this is approximately inside the bird's collarbone or just beneath it. The interclavicular air sac is the last place air goes before it gets exhaled by the bird. It helps force that air out of the body. As far as the purpose of this room, we have very little idea. We could make a lot of conjectures here, but really that's not helpful to anyone.
We can say this, though. The Blackout Club has a lot of signals. We have a signal relay mission, we have cell signals, we have subconscious signals. Despite this being the National Radio Quiet Zone, signals of all kinds are fucking rampant. To relay something is to receive it and then pass it on. Therefore, if we take the name of the room literally, it could be used to pass on signals to somewhere. Where? The surface? People? Hard to say. Signals probably aren't going outside of Red Acre though, because Speakus 1 is pretty hard on the no contact with the outside world.
So we've talked about some bird parts. What about humans? These parts may or may not be truly human. It's really hard to tell. Some data isn't available on what bird organs look like unless you are literally working for a wildlife agency. Either way, the organs are similar enough in both humans and birds that they're recognizable.
So, we have host conditioning, which is somewhat of an analysis to the abdominal cavity.
You can identify this because the ribs at the bottom of the rib cage can be found at the connection to 920 observation, and the disco floor could be seen as intestines. Initially, I thought the disco floor was the small intestine, and the glass square above it was the large intestine, but that may not make sense, especially if it isn't a human anatomy part after all. If it is birds, owls only have one intestinal tract. The purpose of this is training sleepers. This one is really interesting because one of the first rooms we encounter in the maze is ingestion, where sleepers can then split off and go change into work clothes.
So what you're saying is if it's an owl, they're taking in the sleepers, they're inhaling all of the individuality, and they're just chucking out the little pellets of sleepers left over.
Yes, exactly.
Your soul is nothing but a pellet in SAO's gullet.
In the prologue monologue, Belle says this town eats people. So the digestion analogy might continue with host conditioning too. The things you eat train your body, and in host conditioning, where Speak as One's hosts are tested, maybe they're training them, or the song as a whole, similarly.
Thankfully, we're moving all the way away from the digestive tract and straight into something endlessly more fascinating, the plexus to barracks tunnel, which is the trachea. The trachea has bony ridges that help it keep its shape. The colloquial term for this is the windpipe. It leads from the mouth and the nose down to the lungs. If you look up a cross-section of the trachea, you'll see that it's the exact shape of that tunnel. Almost a perfect oval with a little bite taken out of it from the top, where the esophagus is. The purpose of this tunnel is... who the fuck knows? Potentially, it's to prove that Speak as One has a lot of time on their hand. Worst case, we just don't know.
Speak as One sobbing. It's not always that deep. Sometimes you just need a tunnel to get from one place to the other.
This tunnel does not have a proper name. It does not have a proper purpose. We're just mentioning it because it's very easy to prove. It seriously matches up so fucking well.
Now that we've talked about the tunnel to the barracks, let's talk about the barracks. The rough layout of the barracks seems to be shaped like the nasal oral cavity, so the mouth and nose and the space inside both. The tunnel in from the plexus is like the back of the mouth and nose, where they become the same space. There's no more divide between them. I believe this is called the pharynx.
As you go deeper into the barracks, there's a thin wall that bisects the room. Anatomically, assuming that this analogy is right, this would be the wall that separates the oral space from the nasal space. As you go deeper into the barracks, there is a thin wall that bisects the room. Anatomically, assuming that our analogy is right, which we always do, this would be the wall that separates the oral space from the nasal space. In human flesh terms, this would be the roof of the mouth, also known as the palate. The easiest way to compare this would be to have a map, but we don't have a map of the maze, unfortunately. So this is a rough guess based on looking inside. However, if we had a map, it would show a cross-section of that nasal oral cavity.
Next up, we have the somniloquy and the somniloquy. Yeah, there's two of them. This is the inner ear, or more or less, where the basement part is the eardrum in the negative space facing down, and everything else is one of the various inner mechanisms of the ear. Fun fact, the inner ear contains the 3 smallest bones in the body. Most bodies. If you're lavanya, your smallest bone is your spine. But
It's more difficult to figure out what fixtures represent what, but it seems like the main chamber is the middle ear, and the upper catwalk and control room are the innermost ear, where the cochlea is.
The purpose of this, we can only guess, but the idea did once say they're listening for something. And we know that the idea would never lie to us or mislead us. We know that Speakus 1 uses the gas on their host to try and hear or understand something located down in the deepest sleep. What is that something? A lot of players have speculation and ideas, but we're not going to dig into that. Hop into the Discord if you're curious.
Here's another fun, interesting fact. The soliloquies aren't on the same height as each other. If you send one teammate to each one and then stand in the nerve center, you can see that one is higher than the other. Owls also have wildly offset ears, and this allows them to hear in 3 dimensions, where humans, with our ears on roughly the same horizontal plane, can only hear in 2.
Now that we've gotten through those, you might start to see a pattern, but before we end, there's a few more that could be interesting to look into. First is the arches. This is based on a bird spine, probably the neck. These are bird vertebrae, distinctly not human. The question is, where on the bird's body?
Owls have 14 vertebrae in their neck. There are 14 arches in the arches. 8 on the nerve center side, split at the cryptogram library, and 6 on the subliminal media side. Pretty neat.
Next, we have the twist, which is kind of like bird bone marrow, because bird bones are often described as hollow, which is only partially true. Their marrow just looks super, super weird. Find a picture, it's the spitting image of the weird posts in the twist.
And that leads us onto our next weird little location, the throat. Now I bet, dear listeners, you can't guess what the throat parallels to. I'll give you a minute. It parallels to the throat. More specifically, the top of the throat, the bit that's the closest to the surface, is representative of the bird esophagus. The other part of it is the bird proventriculus. Proventriculus is a new term, so we're going to spare you all the nasty little details, and we're just going to say that it is, quote, the first part of a bird's stomach where digestive enzymes are mixed with food before it goes to the gizzard. It is analogous to the gizzard in insects and crustaceans. End quote. That is from the Encarta, 2007.
So in this case, our pseudoproventriculus, in the form of the throat, might not be digesting things, but it could be mixing things. Most parts of the instrument eventually wind up there, and the opening at the surface would allow it to become a resonator chamber.
Now we have the nerve center, which is like a bird cranial cavity. If you look at it, you can see that the post under the little platform is like the spinal cord, and the platform itself is like the cerebellum. There's a little inlet above the disc, and this is just the right place to be the top ear on an owl's skull. Question is, where's the other ear? The shapes around the arch's entrance seem similar, but the nerve center is full of holes and doors.
And what do we consider the center of a nervous system? That'd be the brain. About where the brain would be on our fucked up human man bird beast, we have the big spinning disc, which seems like it might be some kind of cymbal or a resonator. Whatever it is loud as hell, and if you climb on top of it, you can hear all the noises that it is reflecting.
Next is the airway and dream therapy. These two we're covering together because they may be linked in a way that most other rooms of the maze aren't. The airway, the term, could mean several things. If we assume it's meant to be like nerve center where the name describes its anatomical analogy, most of the time when people say airway, they mean the trachea. However, past the trachea, there's 2 branching tubes that go into each lung, and inside each lung are bronchi. Bronchi, if you've never seen them, look kind of like broccoli or trees. You can see where this one is going.
Essentially, the proposal is that dream therapy might be the bronchi to the airway's lung tubes. That's a great word, by the way, lung tubes. If that wasn't so gross and weird, it might very well be romantic.
Good thing it's gross.
Good thing it's weird.
The airway has a lot of woodwinds. It's one of the only parts of the maze that seems like it's primarily made out of wood. Air from the plexus is pumped up through it, and the walls and the floor create these wooden flutes. Dream therapy is also made primarily out of wood, but its purpose is more unclear, so we can't talk about that as much.
Subliminal media is our final area, and that one's actually pretty much straightforward. We can basically say that it is the human brain. Now, this is another one where it would really help to have a visual reference, unless you are perhaps a doctor, but we'll be brief.
The human brain is split, kind of roughly, into sections called lobes, where different lobes control and store different information and execute very different functions. To understand subliminal media as a brain, we need to orientate it so the trapdoors in a soundproof room are roughly windows to the eyes. So the very back of the weird theater is the very back of the brain.
The back of the brain is called the occipital lobe, which governs vision. Moving towards the front, we have the parietal lobe, which deals with perception of the world and making sense of it. In our subliminal media brain, these two lobes basically make up the entire theater space, including the weird seats and the red carpet.
If we skip over a few of the other lobes, the frontal lobe at the very front of the brain has to do with organization and problem solving.
In subliminal media, this is the soundproof part of the room, the control room of some sort. They can see what's going on in the theater, but the reasons why, we just don't know yet.
Obviously, there are other rooms, but we don't have a lot of bright ideas for those. We also have no idea how accurate these guesses are, even if we are very confident in presenting them. But it is fun to speculate. So if you like anatomy and you want to puzzle this out too, please do. It's really fascinating and we love to see it. Astro has put a lot of work into this episode, and as you can see, there is a lot to dig into.
Programming note, we decided to post breaking news every other week in order to reduce our workload. You can find those on our off weeks, as in weeks we don't publish episodes, on Twitter at @TheDreamingPC. We now have a website with links to all of our guides and resources on it. This includes the newbie guide, the lorepedia, the player terms lexicon, and more. You can find that at tinyurl.com/thedreamingprophet. Cal, Archer's Valiant's Gigulium has made a lore master doc. This is updated every Monday or so with all of the latest lore, with help from the Dreaming Prophet, mostly Lavanya because they're amazing. You can find that at tinyurl.com/tbcloreguidev2. There's an official interaction archive on the Discord. This archives both God Talks and personal dreams. If you have transcripts or videos, please add them to the archive. There's also an option to allow your encounter to be used to support the wiki, which is heavily encouraged. Join the Discord to get involved at discord.gg/theblackoutclub. The Blackout Club is made by Question Games. Our transcript and assets are by Lavanya. Audio editing and video is done by me, Astro. Xaviul can't be observed from outside the box and exists in a state between death and life.